Good evening, everyone. Welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 4 of the Case King Pro Series in Season 10. And playing host to the next round on the calendar will be the absolutely legendary circuit of Spa Frachorchamps, which is absolutely guaranteed to be a fantastic evening of action. The Pro Series is always putting on a fantastic show for us, and then with such a circuit like this to play host to it as well, it's going to be an absolute cracker. Last week we were at Laguna Seca, where it was all about strategy. We had mixed conditions, we had every possible aspect of chaos that you could possibly cram into a 90-minute race, and with that it was Grantis Correcas who took a very daring approach and put on an absolute champion's drive in that one. He stayed out on the slick tyres as long as he dared, and then made the transfer over to the wets, whilst the likes of Jade Hutchinson in the Lamborghini, who had another incredibly strong race, and the Lamborghinis did very, very well in the tricky wet conditions, decided to go early, go for the double pit stop as soon as the pit window opened, but in the end the advantage went the way of the Lithuanian, and having gone winless for almost 3 seasons in a row in the first 3 rounds of Season 10, Grantis Correcas has managed to make it 2 out of 3 victories in that. And other than a bit of a mishap, unfortunately, for Suzuka, where he unfortunately got a drive-through penalty, and that took him out of contention. He has put on a stellar series of drives so far, but even with that in mind, he is not your championship leader. Nicholas Huben, who ended up finishing P3 at Laguna Seca, put on another excellent drive in the Unicorns of Love Mercedes, and consistency has been the friend of the German driver. Of course, there are drop scores in this championship, so the 2 worst results, including any no-shows potentially as well, which will be counted as 0 scores for these drivers, will end up being removed from their tally at the end of the season. So, of course, if Correcas doesn't have too many in the way of difficult days inside the cockpit of his Porsche, then he could be on for a very, very tasty season of points indeed. However, of course, it is a long championship. We still have 9 rounds to go, and very quickly those difficult days can accumulate, and consistency is always key in a championship, especially when there is such a high caliber of drivers taking part in this one. Like I say, we'll be going to Spa for tonight's action. Absolutely fantastic circuit that is just driver's dream through and through. It's a legendary circuit, and it's a legend for a reason. It puts up all the trials and tribulations that you want as a driver to really push yourself to the absolute max, to really extract everything that a car is capable of. And in these GT3 cars, it is going to be a fantastic challenge indeed. We've also got quite the grid of drivers for this evening. We've got a few returning names from previous seasons, some rather notable ones. I won't spoil any surprises too much before we head into qualifying, but all of those factors put together, we really do have the premise for an exciting bit of action for tonight's Pro Series race. And speaking of all of that wonderful stuff that we are likely to see, let's have a little bit of a look at what our circuit entails. 20 turns and 7 kilometers of absolute driving glory down into La Source for turn 1, although the start will take place on that run up towards Eau Rouge and then through into Radion. Absolutely formidable parts of this circuit without a shadow of a doubt. Down the Kemmel Straight before you get to Les Combes. Really nice flowing series of corners when you get the line correct. Down towards Bruxelles, tricky through there. Want to carry the momentum through No Name and then down in towards Pouon, and that is certainly one that puts a lot of stress on these tyres. And in the 1.9 update, where we know that tyre wear is a bit more difficult, and having that balance of maintaining surface temperatures and pressures and all that throughout the lap is ever more crucial, it's going to put serious strain on the setups as well as these drivers' capabilities. Up the hill, back again through Blanchimont, and then in towards the bus stop chicane to round out the lap. And like I say, is an absolute cracker And it's going to be really interesting to see how these 1.9 cars end up faring. At Laguna Seca, we knew it was going to be Porsche territory. In actual fact, there's a few drivers that really played their cars quite strategically. They had the opportunity to go over to the 992, which we saw drivers like Jardier, and I also believe Marco Bischoff may have done as well, if memory serves correct. However, Henrik Gamble, Grantis Correcas, some of those guys, they decided to stay in the first generation Porsche because when it came down to outright pace at Laguna Seca, the BOP for that car was still the preferable one to have. Going into this one, I am expecting everybody who has taken a Porsche for this season to now be in that 992 generation of that car, which means we're going to have a fleet of 992s, 296s, of the Ferraris, the Lamborghini Evo 2s. We've got a lot of drivers in the Mercedes this season. That's a car that seems to be performing very, very well at the moment in this 1.9 update. Aston Martins in the grid as well. They've traditionally gone very well here at Spa. The Honda, which used to be an absolute monster around the circuit, I do believe has been sort of a little bit slapped down by the 1.9 update. I don't think it's quite the same monster that it was, although I did listen to some thoughts from Jardier in one of his latest videos, which seemed to suggest that maybe a focused, heavy BOP rework could be on the way, and that'd be very interesting to see what happens. Maybe once the dust has settled on 1.9 and all of those things have kind of had time to establish themselves and everyone gets more of a feeling of how to drive with the new physics and updates, that then we'll see something changing in terms of the BOP for the circuit. And I think with all of that said, the server should be open for us to head on into, so we can see exactly how our drivers are going to be getting on tonight. We had 90 minutes of racing last week. We have 60 minutes this time around, but Spa will certainly be making sure it's an action-packed event through and through from start to finish. So I shall get us loaded into the server in just a moment, and we can have a little bit of a look at how our drivers are going about their final bits and pieces of preparation for tonight's race, because you have a couple of different routes in these final stages before you end up fully committing into towards qualifying. You've got the opportunity to either explore what you want to do in terms of qualifying, or you can have a bit of a look at doing some race prep and trying to iron out those final elements. It really does depend quite often on the driver which way they end up going. So, it's going to be really interesting to see what they end up doing in terms of all of that. Now, you may also notice a few little changes and bits and pieces on the stream in terms of graphics and overlays. We've got a fantastic series of changes that have taken place regarding, we've got some really nice transitions for some replay stuff coming up, which hopefully should also work well. We've also got a few new sponsors welcoming to Season 10 in LFM as well, where we have got SimuCube, we have Box 1 Racing, and we have BSquared that are joining our other sponsors as well. So big thank you to all of them for hopping on board the LFM community and supporting the series, because obviously it would not be possible without them. So right now, having a look at Aidan Walsingham in that Visceral Esports Ferrari 296, a car that I imagine is going to be pretty handy around this circuit. It does seem to really be quite the downforce monster. Of course, the Ferrari 488 was traditionally already quite a fantastic and well put together package in terms of its cornering capabilities, but the big thing that ended up hampering that one was always its ability to negotiate curbs. It was a great all-rounder, fantastic in mixed conditions as well. And now, this 296 just kind of takes those nice elements of the 488 and it just builds upon them a little bit further. Very aggressive aero package, very distinctive set of luves over the front end of the car, which when you're in the cockpit of this, as we'll go on board, you can see them sticking out there over the front left wheel arch. Very aggressive series of vents. And whilst this may not be the roaring, naturally aspirated sound that we do love to hear from a lot of these cars going down the V6 turbocharged route, as a lot of GT cars are pursuing nowadays, Still a very nice engine note to it, and like I say, a very nice car to be driving as well. So I'm expecting that one to be performing pretty nicely. You see Walsingham flirting with the edges of track limits. We'll need to be careful of some of that when it comes down to the race, as track limits can be quite the tricky one to manage around here at times. It certainly does. It encourages you to really push what the cars are capable of, and as such, Walsingham gives a perfect example, and almost goes around at the final chicane, that it just means that you're often just maybe going a little bit further over the AstroTurf, or just taking a little bit of extra curve here and there, and particularly aspects like through the apex of Radion, or on the exit of Lacom, or as you're making your way back up from turn 16 on the exit of Stavilo, and then back up to the top of the hill. It really does mean that you're pushing everything that you can. There's not really much in the sense of gravel traps and grass on the exits of these corners, or at least you have got some wiggle room to work with. And so as such, drivers, especially in the Pro Series, where every thousandth of a second is absolutely on the line if you want to be competing for those top prizes, so they really do tend to push everything that they can get away with. And in terms of the Lambo during this update, in terms of the Evo 2 edition, I think everyone was pretty pleased in terms of the performance of that car. It seems to, based on last week, have very good wet weather pace in the long run. Eventually, it did go the way of Grantis Correcas in his 991 Porsche. It'd be interesting to see the 992, how that performs in the wet weather as well, so we can get a direct comparison of all of the new cars. But the Lamborghini Evo 2 has got a much better aero package, and it generally feels a lot lighter to drive. I think it's much less of a tyre muncher than it used to be. It was traditionally, at various stages in ACC, has been quite the difficult car to maintain good long-run pace over. Sometimes good at certain circuits over one lap, but in the long run, maybe not quite so much. But I think, everybody now, no matter what car you're in, there does seem to be this element of having to really be in tune with the car in terms of how you kind of nurse those tyres during the stint. And the Lamborghini is now significantly more capable of doing that than it once was. And it still delivers good power as well, got a good amount of punch down the straights. The 992 is faster in a straight line than its predecessor, but still is a little bit of a handicap of the Porsche, but it's still a cornering weapon, so it's trade-offs here and there, depending on what type of circuits we are racing at. Of course, those cars are always going to have their sort of relative strengths and weaknesses to a certain degree, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this all ends up going for our drivers tonight. And also, like a car that I mentioned a bit earlier on, the Mercedes definitely has benefited. I think that was one of the cars where during all of these tyre and suspension modelling changes that ACC has gone through, that there was a major rework in the sort of the general vehicle dynamics of the Mercedes, and as such, it is definitely a competitive package and one to very much be aware of for these races, without a shadow of a doubt. We've got some Aston Martin representation this week as well. We've got Walter Neuwirth, bit of a regular from last season, and he is in the Aston Martin again, and representing Team Aston Martin Enjoy. So there are a few that still are enjoying the British outfit in the GT3 class, but yeah, there was a time where that car was absolutely formidable no matter where you went, and it was extremely quick around here. I think it should still be pretty handy, but it'll be interesting to see how that one ends up pairing up against some of these new generations of cars. Now, I did give a little bit of a kind of suggestion that we had some pretty big names on the grid this evening, and we have none other than Trevor Wenham, the man that was top of the LFM licensing system for a very long time. I think may still hold the record of the longest consecutive amount of days in that #1 spot before being overtaken by Marco Bischoff and then by Grantis Correcas. And I've seen Trevor dabbling a little bit more in ACC more recently, and he is in this Ferrari 296, and I expect that man to be incredibly fast We've also got other returnees, the likes of Robbie Stapleford for G2 Esports. He's in the Aston Martin as well, so expect to see him doing some pretty quick things. We've got some good representation from Jean Lacey Esports as well. They've had a bit of a roster kind of juggle, I think, as of late. They've taken on a lot of new drivers. No, Hutchinson recently joined. Darren King moved there. Hugo Merles is part of that team now as well, and I think there could even be another driver in this field as well. Potentially, although the name escapes me, for more of that team who have been pushing on very much with the Ferrari and Lamborghinis. And I think they would have been very, very happy with the updates that they had going on. Topping the timing sheets at the end of that practice session is Jack Alexander, another returnee to the series, 2:16.8 from the number 27 car. Great stuff from him. And George Boothby in the server as well. I thought he might be preoccupied this evening, because I am aware that there is another event going on which I think has the attention of some of our other regulars, namely being drivers like Luke Whitehead, Jardier, I think as well. But I thought Mr. Boothby was also participating, so we'll quite happily have him in the server. And he didn't have the greatest of times at Laguna Seca. Unfortunately, a collision. I think it was Krzysztof Makowski who was actually a backmarker and completely misjudged his braking in his own 296, and unfortunately clattered the back of Boothby and really affected his chances of getting a good race result. So have to see if George can have better luck here. I think he has won here in the Honda in previous seasons, if I'm not mistaken. And in that Ferrari 296, imagine that's going to be a well-performing car, so I expect to see him near the pointy end of the standings. Also, I have had a little bit of a switcheroo in terms of how I'm doing things, a little bit on the streaming front with the audio. So if anyone in the chat could let me know whether or not the in-game audio is at a suitable level, if you want it turned up a little bit, then do let me know, and I will adjust that as we go. So a couple of drivers just rounding out their laps at the moment. Big improvement for Hugo Merles. I think, though, that Delta may be a little bit misrepresentative from one of what I imagine was one of his previously abandoned laps before the Frenchman as he hits the time beam. It was a lap time that we'll never know the answer for because he was the last driver to finish that lap. And leading out of the pits is not quite going to be Timo Karppinen in that Grip Hats engineering Lamborghini, who also had a very strong bit of pace at Laguna Seca. There is a Porsche just in front. I think that is Carl Natter, in that 992 Porsche for Spaghetti Racing. Fantastic team name as everyone barrels our way down the Kemmel Straight for the very first time. And just in terms of the feedback in the chat, car numbers will be available when we are in the race. So for qualifying, we'll be able to see the relative to the fastest driver and also the driver's individual lap improvements. But for the race, you will have the gaps and the number. I'm afraid I can't add the manufacturer as well. There's only a limited number of a piece of information I can put together at one time, I'm afraid. But perhaps every now and again we shall chop and change between various bits of overlay telemetry so we can have a bit of a review to see which cars have been performing best around this circuit. You can see Karppinen putting some pressure on to the German driver just in front of him. And Karppinen, like I say, did show some excellent pace at Laguna Seca, and I think is feeling pretty happy with this new Lamborghini. He's got a nice livery on board for this week as well. And it'd be interesting to see how much pace he can extract out of this car around this circuit. Traditionally wasn't a circuit that was very good for the Lamborghini, but with this new Evo 2 package, perhaps it will be a stronger performing candidate. And as everyone sorts themselves out a little bit, I think we'll go on board with Timo, because I think we had some onboards of the 296s and the 992 from last week. So let's see what it's like on board a lap in this Evo 2 around the legendary Spa Frachorchamps circuit. So setting up the lap now is the Finnish driver down towards La Source. He goes trying to spot his braking point. If you want to hook yourself into the camera, it's It's all about the exit here. Dip yourself over that curb. Hit the loud pedal as quickly as you can. Don't run over that yellow curb on the left-hand side. Got to be tricky not to extend over there because although it won't likely contribute too much in terms of track limits, will lose you time. Up through Eau Rouge and through there on the 1.9 physics. Cars tend to be a little bit more stable at high speed over those bumps through Eau Rouge and Radion now. Nicely negotiated from the Finnish drivers. He now heads towards Lacombe for the first time. Spot your braking point. Just want to brake after the curb starts there and then just graze each of these curbs. Hook yourself over turn 8 just a little bit more so you can open up the exit of turn 9 here. Got to be careful on the outskirts of the track there not to extend too far. And then tricky braking zone through turn 10. Bit of a double apex here and playing around with the gears, trying to maintain that traction on the exit, and then through No Name, another tricky one. See, hassling the car through there as he tries to get on the power as quickly as possible. Now, big corner coming up, big commitment in towards Pool, and you can see Lamborghini maybe a touch of understeer in that car. Didn't really seem to have any sort of instability out of the rear, but did seem to carry fairly decent speed through there, although I think maybe could have had a bit more of an optimal line. See, dancing with the steering on the entry, so the back of the car feeling a little bit loose, and he's letting just the weight of the car kind of move itself from side to side through there before he really commits to then using the steering to really yank it around the rest of the apex. On the power now, on the exit of Stavlo, through the right-hander of 16. Got to be careful with track limits there, and when we get into the race conditions and those front tyres really start to burn up a little bit, got to be careful not to extend that part because you want to stay flat, but it's very easy to end up running a little bit too wide. We've got a yellow flag coming up with the number 3 car. I'm not sure who that is. They seem to have pulled over to the side of the road. Spotting your braking point in towards the bus stop chicane. Clipping that first apex in towards the second. Squared up on the exit. Fairly nicely done by the looks of it from the Grip Hacks engineering driver. And immediately on the board, it's a 2:17.18. Although we already know certain drivers are going to go quicker than that. And Jack Alexander, who was looking very, very quick in the opening part of this qualifying, the practice session, immediately goes top of time sheets on a 2:16.1. That is absolutely fantastic pace from, I believe, the Scottish driver. We haven't got his flag inside the game, unfortunately, but I do believe Jack is from Scotland. And I'll tell you what, 296 is right now looking very speedy. Hugo Merles right now sitting in P2 with Walsingham making it 1-2-3 for the Ferraris. And then the first non-Ferrari and the first of the 217s was Robbie Stapleford. He's just been displaced by 2 drivers. One make that 3, one being Steinbrenner in the BMW, another one of the Ferrari, Samir Fock in the Yas Heat car, and Nicholas Huben, your championship leader in that Unicorns of Love Mercedes. Very distinctive livery on board that one. But I'll tell you what, Porsches have come to join the party. Noah Eder hops into P4, and his teammate from K Kramer Racing Esports, Marco Bischoff, and two-time Pro Series champion after several titanic fights throughout Season 7 and Season 8. Marco Bischoff getting himself right now provisionally on the front row, 2:16.3. And let's see, can we get a glimpse of the speedo from his car? I'm just trying to see 264, 265, 266, 267. I think I've got a smaller preview window at my end, so I think that's the sort of speed that Marco was hitting. Well, let's see if we can try catch the who's in the number 7 car. We've got Axel Ramone, and unfortunately I can't quite catch the speedo on that one, but like I say, I have gathered that generally speaking that the Porsches do seem to have had, or the 992 edition specifically has been better in those straight speed sections, and really being able to kind of just not have so much of a crippling disadvantage in those high-speed parts of the track. Before, it was just overwhelmingly difficult to keep up with certain cars. I tell you what, though, someone isn't having any trouble. Mr. Walsingham goes up to the top of the time sheets. Trevor Winham, quick to jump in behind him in the 296 as well, just 0.03 of a second behind, and we're very nearly making our way down into the 215s. And reports that George Boothby broke his finger. I'm extremely sorry to hear that. I do hope that that recovers sooner rather than later, whether or not you can get broken fingers from sim racing industries, particularly on direct drive wheels nowadays, but I don't know if that was actually from the act of sim racing, but one way or another, he has joined for this evening's action in the server. Just trying to find him, actually, on the timing sheet. And where is Mr. Boothby? Has he hopped out again? He might well have hopped out. Unless him breaking his finger actually happened within the space of the last 5 minutes, which would be rather incredibly unfortunate. But it does look like one of the most winningest drivers in Pro Series history, unfortunately, looks like he's hopped back out of the server again. So we had him for a brief period, but no longer seem to, and also possibly may have just had a fantastic ACC noise explosion. Apologies. So if that did come across, it did go off in my ears. The shotgun sound still very much strong in 1.9. Jack Alexander going purple at the moment. So is Trevor Wenham, though. Both very, very quick on these current laps. In actual fact, very much next to one another on the circuit as well. Bischoff going quicker as well. And yes, sim racing generated injury. Was that actually on the back of Laguna Seca by any chance, or was that from the other event that he was meant to be anticipated to drive in? Ah, dear, that is horribly unfortunate. Well, best wishes to George. I hope that recovers sooner rather than later. Very annoying injury to get as well, because obviously incredibly inhibiting, but sort of, not visually much to shout about. Hopefully not, anyway. And Trevor Wenham, though, does do a 2:15.9. Personal best in all three sectors. Wasn't the first, or wasn't the first in kind of any individual sector. Those honours go to Jack in Sector 1. Walsingham did have a purple sector somewhere. I was trying to see. Let's see if we can gather where those purple sectors exist. We've got down in P8, that's Samir, that's purple in Sector 3. And from what I've got on my other timing sheets, it is still Walsingham that holds the fastest sector in the second part of the lap. So 5 minutes left on this qualifying session left to go as more shuffling in the order takes place. Marco Bischoff is rounding out his lap time, and he's 2/10 up on his previous best, although not the best exit out of the bus stop chicane, and it won't be a position improvement. Samir jumps up to P4. So continuing the trend of the Ferraris at the pointy end of the field. Hugo Merla is trying to make it another one to join the party. Will it be Ferrari 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I know that in SRO, the Mercedes was looking exceptionally quick at Monza, and it might well be the case that the Ferrari is looking very speedy here, and it's not quite good enough to make it Ferrari positions 1 to 5. But still good enough to improve and go up to P6. Noah Reader has just started a lap. He's on a small improvement at the moment. Merla's better exit out of turn 1 as well. Let's see what he can do. Makoski, who had a rather troublesome time at Laguna Seca, is just rounding out in towards Sector 3. Whereabouts is Robbie Stapleford, who's improving. So he's got about half the lap to go as well. And we've got the likes of Trevor, who is just finishing his lap. And again, he is on an absolute flyer. He's found a 10th over his previous best. Jack Alexander not wanting to give him any sort of tow down towards the bus stop chicane. And Trevor gained a lot under braking there as he maintained it on exit. I tell you what, he has. It's 2/10 up for Trevor Wenham. It's an absolute stellar time from the British driver. Purple in sectors 2 and 3 and a 2:15.7. 3.5 tenths clear of the rest of the field. And well, what a way to make a statement back into the Pro Series. Trevor, we've been awaiting your competition in this championship, and that is certainly a way to lay down exactly what other drivers in this split can be expecting from him. Angel Nestroza for Yas Heat in that Porsche 992, rounding out the lap. The man from Chile heading into the bus stop chicane now, as well as go on board with him down the gears. Fantastic series of noises. You shift your way through there. He's got Ferrari just up in front, but shouldn't cause him any issues. Porsche excellent on the traction. It's a big improvement from that for Nostroza. Good enough for the top 10. So he'll be, I think, fairly happy with that. Hugo Merles is up by a couple of tenths as well in this number 17 Jean Alesi esports car. And down towards the bus stop chicane, the Frenchman goes, clipping that first apex. I think maybe went a little bit deep in there. He's going to compromise the exit and lose a bit of time, I think, and he does, but it's still going to be a decent improvement. It's good enough for P3, and now it really is Ferraris 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What a statement that is from the Italian outfit. And Hugo, in actual fact, already gaining a little bit over his previous best in the early stages of that lap. So there's no reader. So a couple of them maybe have a little bit extra time to work with in that opening part of the lap. And I've just put 2 and 2 together. I did see a yellow flag for the number 3 car, which may well have been George Boothby, because for those that are perhaps new to the LFM ranking system, as Hutchinson's just rounding out a lap in the Lamborghini, only got enough for P15, so maybe the Lamborghini not the best car suited for this one, although Carpenter doing a good job up in P12. With Darren King, actually, I think the lead of the Lamborghinis at the moment, sitting in just outside the top 10. The numbers that you see in the server are based on the relative elo that each of these drivers has. So the number 1 car on the server, and number 1 car actually on the LFM platform, is Grantis Correcas, and then it's the likes of Marco Bischoff. So the number 3 car may well have been George Boothby. Like I say, I think I've put 2 and 2 together there, and the yellow flag, the collision that was being spoken about in the chat, I think unfortunately it was right at the beginning of qualifying when everyone was starting to get ready, and maybe someone's looked down at their dash and has gone into the back of the Ferrari driver, and I think it's unfortunately caused him quite an injury. So that is a big shame for George, and it's very unfortunate that he's not going to be able to take part, by the looks of it, in the race tonight, and hopefully he will have a speedy recovery overall in that. And yeah, we do have live stewarding, and we do have stewards that will be working overtime, I imagine, in the background of this race, because Spa does tend to promote quite the bit of action. Hugo Merles currently sitting in P3. It's been a good lap again. Deep, though, in towards the bus stop chicane. He was up by 2 tenths. I think he'll maintain that sort of advantage by the time he gets to the line, but he's still got time to find. Good enough, though, for the front row. I tell you what, Noah Reed, a big lap from him. P3 from the K. Kramer Racing esports driver. And Marco Bischoff right now down in P7, and 3 tenths adrift of his teammate. It was Henrik Gamble that really laid down some fantastic times last week at Laguna Seca. Right now it's Noah Reeder that's doing the heavy lifting for that. I think it's an all-German lineup for K. Kramer Racing esports. Big competitors in the Endurance Championship as well. Someone that's going very quickly, though, Grantis Correcas, your winningest driver so far in Season 10, trying to make his way up into a top 10. Barely scrapes in there, and that'll be it for Correcas. So the man that's looking to really make a fantastic bid in this championship. He's had a very strong opening start to the season, but right now, it's this circuit in particular, Porsche, or at least the pace that he's managed to extract out of it, not looking the most competitive. And Noah Reeder, still fantastic job from him. We've got a few drivers rounding out their laps. Angel Nostroza is one of them that is on an improvement. Bischoff has found a little bit of time in the middle sector as well. Trying to find number 19 car. That's Sean Tempest, who's going to be the next one to round out the lap. And he's backed out of that one entirely. So that won't be an improvement from him. Next car we've got making their way forward is Darren King in the Jean Alesi Esports Lamborghini. Up by a tenth. It might be good enough to jump him up the order of smidgen. It does on P11. And next across the line, I think I'm just trying to catch who that is going to be. We've got a few that are making their way towards the timing beam. 2 tenths up for Robbie Stapleford as he returns into a series. Good enough for P13. I'll tell you what, though, keep an eye on this man, as also Hugo Merles not too far behind him. He's found a 10th. And Trevor Wenham Oh, Trevor Wenham's going quick as well. He's started a lap right at the very end of this 15-minute session. He might be about to spoil everyone's day. Marco Bischoff, though, one right now in the hot seat. It's a decent improvement from the two-time champ, and it's good enough for P5, but he won't beat his teammate. And Hugo Merles, he does improve, but by 0.08 of a second. He will not be able to take pole position. And Trevor Wenham, he was improving, but as it turned out, he did. I thought he was a bit out of position relative to some of those other cars, and he was as such in the. He started that lap after the session ended, so it did not count. But he was going quickly, and I'll tell you what, that very likely would have been scaring some of those drivers as they see the sort of pace that the legendary licensed Brit has been able to showcase. So we will have a look at the running order. I'm afraid that unfortunately all of the new cars as part of the 1.9 update, that we have still got some issues with some of the cameras. So the cameras on those cars aren't quite working in the way that we conventionally would have them. So apologies for that. But Trevor Wenham sits on pole position then with Hugo Merles to round out the front row. Great effort there from the Frenchman. And then it is Jack Alexander. Stellar effort from the Scottish driver in that number 27 car. He's shown great pace at times, but he seems very much at home with the 296. Fantastic stuff as well from Noah Reeder. Number 14 car on the grid in the Porsche. Followed up by Marco Bischoff, his teammate in P5. And no easy feat to beat him. I think actually with the number of cars we've got on the grid, I think perhaps I'll go to a bit of a different camera for this one. Then we have Walsingham for Visceral Esports starting P6 with Samir Fock in the number 11 car. For Yassi starts in P7. Then Christoph Makowski with a fantastic qualifying from him. Not always the strongest in qualifying, but a good showing from him. And then your championship leader, Nicholas Huben, who has been Mr. Consistency. But this was, I think, maybe his or the furthest down he started a race. I have to see what the Unicorns of Love driver can do in the long run. Grantis Correcas, number 1 car, starts P10 with Darren King, the next of the Jean Lacey Esports crew, starting P11. And then Timu Karppinen got a very strong showing at the very mixed conditions that we had at Laguna Seca last week. Starts in P12. Robbie Stapleford starts in 13th place with Angelina Stroza. The man from Chile starts in 14th in the 26 Yassit car. Jade Hutchinson further down the order than he would have liked. Lamborghinis, maybe not quite the car to have around this circuit. They've been on pretty equal footing with some of those other cars, the new releases at other circuits, but it appears that maybe Spa is not quite one of them. Robin Schaefer starts P16 with Neil Steinbrenner in the number 12 car, starts 17th with Voltec Neuwirth in the number 20 Aston Martin in P18. Valentin Barrier, another one of the Yassit drivers, fairly new to that roster as well, starts in 19th place. And then Manos Gerardis for TF Racing, another one of the Lamborghini drivers. And I think that's an all-Greek team, TF Racing, as well. And he will round out the top 20. Sasha Vassner starts in 21st position with Sean Tempest in 22nd in the number 19 car. Carl Natter in 23rd position in that Spaghetti Racing Porsche we saw at the beginning of qualifying. Nico Peninen, the Finnish driver, number 30 car in the server, regular participant of the Pro Series. And good to see him back again, and he starts in 24th position. Komar Zayuk, the next of the Aston Martins. Man has been very, very quick on his day. Maybe struggling a little bit for pace, though, around this Spa circuit. Matteo Noldi starts in 26th with Samuel Ratz in 27th place. Michael Frey starts in 28th, the Swiss driver in the Porsche. He had a busy time at Laguna Seca. Maybe he'll be looking for a bit of a quieter one this evening. Lukas Steckenberger in the number 28, starts in 29th. And then Axel Ramone, who I thought we might see a bit further up the order. Not a bad lap time from him by any stretch of the imagination, but has been incredibly quick at times, but wasn't quite able to extract maybe the pace that he was looking for. Jan Drexler starts in 31st position, with Manuel Fuchs in the 31 car starts in 32nd, and then the number 33 starts in P33, and will round out the order for Tobias Nur, as we then go back, ready to see what all of the action for this evening's race is going to bring. Right now, drivers not looking like they're going to have to be dealing with some of the unpredictable weather aspects that they had at Laguna Seca, at least for the opening 30 minutes. And remember that there is a mandatory pit stop for these drivers to serve, and they have to serve that in a central pit window during this race. And so that does tend to add to the complications of strategy-wise. That was what led to those very different approaches that we saw from drivers at Laguna Seca. But it does at least look, for the time being, there might be a bit more one-dimensional for these drivers today. A bit of a long outlap for these guys. Obviously a long lap here at Spa, one of the few circuits we go to where we end up seeing times of over 2 minutes. But very much crucial preparation, and track temperature-wise, or an ambient temperature, which is the main driver of the environment conditions here on ACC, looking fairly okay, so nothing too astonishing for these guys to have to try to manage. So maybe tyre wear won't be quite so much of an issue as it could potentially be, but I very much expect to still see it factor as something that these guys are going to have to try to manage very carefully during the next hour of racing. A lot of high-speed corners here that are really going to put a load of force through the tyres, and that'll be something they have to manage. And if you are running those so-called meta setups of the very heavy, sort of heavily amplified negative toe, things like that, and then if you combine that with some rather strong caster and camber angles as well, you are going to be putting a lot of stress through the tyres. And the worst aspect is if you get that distortion, lateral distortion in temperature between the inner surface, or the inside surfaces of the tyres, and the outside surface, and that causes both kind of a mechanical and chemical change in the tyre, and it starts to promote graining. So that's why maybe for qualifying you can look to get away with something like that. It also helps you generate some extra tyre temperature a bit faster, which is something that seems to be taking a bit more time to generate over the 1.8 update. But in the race, perhaps not the strategy to go down on that front. So it'll be interesting to see how all of these cars behave. I imagine, though, the Ferraris are going to be pretty stellar. They were very clearly the fastest cars on track in qualifying, and they've always been very much known to be able to make their tyres last. So be interesting to see how they get on, but it could very well be a fight between those front three Ferraris for the race win, but still impressive showings from the Porsches from Noah Eder and Marco Bischoff to get themselves into the top 5 positions. Also, just want to quickly say a big thank you since the last stream, and I think actually we crept over the milestone today. We hit 2,400 subscribers on the channel. We're closing in on 2,500, and very much a real possibility we could see that in a couple of weeks or so time. So if you are enjoying all of the action, you want to keep up with more of it in the future, then do consider subscribing to the channel. Drivers get themselves into formation now, but the race won't get underway until they are exiting La Source, and then it'll be Trevor Wenham in that number 4 car to lead them into Eau Rouge for the first time. And I tell you what, his mirrors are likely to be very full and busy by the time he gets to the end of the Kemmel Straight. And whether or not Hugo Merles, Jack Alexander, or even the 2 Porsches a bit further behind, if they can get a bit of a double slipstream, who will end up leading at the end of this lap. It's a fairly long race still, so it won't decide everything, but keeping it clean and yourself out of trouble in this opening phase of the race is critical. So for 60 minutes of racing here at Spa Frachorchamps for round number 4 in the Case King Pro Series, be Trevor Wenham to lead them towards Eau Rouge. It's green light away then. It's a great start and reaction from both Noah Reeder and your race leader Trevor Wenham at the moment, side by side between the Porsche and the Ferrari behind. We're going to have to go to Helicam to try to capture some of this as they all snake their way through Eau Rouge. I think that was Bolt saying Neuwirth. Oh, big off. That's Timu Karppinen, who's gone straight into the wall, and there's chaos further down the order. Lots of cars involved there. Many cars having to take avoiding action, and that's a big pile up. But we'll have to keep an eye on the action at the front as well. It's Trevor Wenham that still leads ahead of Merles and Alexander Bischoff up to P4. Angel and Strode has gone off there in the background as well. Walsingham dropping behind, actually side by side now with Bischoff. Someone being ditched into the gravel for a moment there as well. And it's Noah Reeder now versus Walsingham trying to go around the outside after such a great launch. Number 15 car has gone off at Lacon. That's Valentin Barrier. Through No Name they go. It's Ferrari 1, 2, 3, followed by Bischoff in the Porsche. And his teammate Noah Reeder does have to give way to Walsingham in the end, who finds his way up into P5. And there's a lot of action still going on side by side between the two John Lacey cars. That is Darren King versus Jade Hutchinson. And it's the man from the UK that ends up coming out on top on that one. And scraps happening up and down the field. But a lot of cars caught up in that big crash. Valentin has already retired to the pits. Michael Frey was involved in that. Carl Natter, I think, as well. Gerardis, I think, possibly as well. Although there was a lot of cars that really came to quite a heavy stop. And in actual fact, Gerardis, yeah, you can see, I think, a little bit of damage on the front end of that car, but a lot of cars did their best to really come to a complete halt to avoid being caught up in the carnage. But unfortunately, that is what can happen. We didn't quite see what it was that sent Karppinen into the wall, but we very much saw the consequences, and that unfortunately is what can happen at this circuit. Hutchinson applying the pressure to his teammate now down towards the bus stop chicane for the first time. Trevor Wenham leading by a second. Margins are a little bit closer further down the order though. Steinbrenner having to be a bit aware of the Aston Martin. Sasha Vassner now trying to go around the outside and now make it the inside on the exit. Oh, someone else has got around. That's Ramone that's gone around the Frenchman in the number 7 Aston Martin, as that is Gerardis is coming through again, slotting through a couple more cars, go into the pits, almost 3 wide down towards La Source. They go on a car a little bit off on the exit as well. There's further contact. Robin Schaefer that's been sent around, and everyone having to almost come to a complete halt again as so Robin Schaefer, it's Steinbrenner that's been sent around in all of that, and he's going to have to concede several positions there. And I wonder if Robin Schaefer, maybe the reason why he's going slowly, whether he was the catalyst in that contact, maybe will be giving up some positions in one way or another. He's going to be giving up potentially some at the very end of this camel straight, with both the Ferrari and the Aston Martin of Samuel Ratz and Komar Sayuk make their way past before they get to turn 7, and close up behind as well from the other drivers following in that train as well. Further up the order, gaps pretty open between your top 6, and then it is Samuel Fock applying the pressure to Noah Reeder, followed by Korekis, who's gained a couple of crucial positions, and Nicholas Huben, in fact, finds himself in P9 at the moment, with Ines Stroza down in P10 to round out the top 10 of your field at the moment. But fantastic breakaway at the front of the field from Trevor Wenham, who really has managed to extend a healthy advantage over Hugo Merles early on, maybe running a setup that's generating a bit of extra tyre temperature in the early stage of this race. Whether or not that will come back to bite him in terms of longevity in those tyres, we'll have to wait and see. Robin Schaefer continuing to give up positions then. I'm not sure if that was voluntary or not, as Matteo Noldi also into the pits as well. So that's both the 34 and the number 15 car who have found themselves into the pit lane very early on in this race. Further up the order though, Walsingham applying the pressure to Bischoff. What's the speed difference of the Ferrari versus a Porsche? It's pretty noticeable, and he's looking towards the outside into the bus stop they go. Ferrari versus Porsche all the way around the outside of the bridge. Trying to go. He's got a little bit deep on the brake, so he's got the inside line, has he? Not quite. Marco Bischoff, an abundance of racecraft on board the cockpit of that car, and he'll send the British driver into the clutches of his teammate, the K Kramer Racing Esports car of Noah Reeder now. But the Ferraris, they seem strong in a straight line, and whether or not the Porsche can keep up, especially with the immediate pressure behind of Samir Fock, we'll have to wait and see. Tobias Nur has just lost out to Ramone, is recovering his way through the order by the looks of it, and the Frenchman up into 25th position. But here's a drag race, so we're expecting Orvat's car out the pit lane. That might make things a little bit on the busy side. So Norida trying to close down on Walsingham, can't do it. But what about Samir Fock, who's closing towards Campbell Straight? Does he think about move towards the inside? Not quite. He's brought Caracas along with him, and they're absolutely running nose to tail at the moment, but nothing that either one of them can do. Someone though that's trying to make something happen is Darren King, bringing his teammate along with him as well on the back of Robbie Stapleford in that G2 Esports Aston Martin, but neither of the two Lamborghinis able to make their way through on that second run out the field, but they will sit in formation for the time being. Keep an eye on this scrap. Up at the front, Trevor Wenham bouncing a bit back and forth between 7/10 and a second to Hugo Merles. I'll tell you what, in actual fact, I think Merles may have made a mistake through Pawn there, because Jack Alexander has managed to close the gap significantly there, just within half a second now, so maybe that could be a scrap that takes place in just a few moments' time. Further down the order, still very close proximity between the likes of Stapleford, King and Hutchinson then. And shortly they will begin the climb up towards the bus stop chicane. It's flat out all the way up the hill. But I'll tell you what, it can certainly get busy. There is no doubt about it. Let's see for the fight for what is P6. Doesn't look like anything will happen here. Jack Alexander closing in the toe towards the bus stop chicane as well. I don't think he's going to be able to make anything happen. I'll tell you what though, Samir reeling in. So is Walsingham actually, trying to close in on Marco Bischoff. Again, he can't do anything. Samir glued to the back of the Porsche as ahead through bus stop chicane, but no one quite able to make a move. I'll tell you what, fastest lap of the race, so last time around, Jack Alexander, 2:16.1. The Scotsman is definitely here to play, and although Trevor Wenham may be about a second up the road, with this sort of pace, very much could be under pressure soon, much like Nicholas Huben, who's trying to apply pressure to Granted Correca's rivals in the championship. So crucial positions. Let's see. First drag race is going to be taking place. Jack Alexander, who was purple in 2 out of 3 sectors on the last lap. Can he do anything about Hugo Merles? Who is getting a little bit of a toe off your race leader? I don't think he can. Someone that maybe will make something happen though. Oh, it's all kicking off. We got, oh damn, big contact! And that's Walsingham and Bischoff that come together. Walsingham manages to continue. Bischoff into the wall and is completely off to the side of the road there. No Reader still fighting with Samir Fock on the exit of Lake On. And the Latvian driver gets a beautiful cutback on the run down towards the inside at Bruxelles. Can he make it stick? Ferrari versus Porsche. The Porsche Granted Correca's trying to get involved as well. And I think he's managed to make it stick. Fantastic move from the Yassits Esports driver, who manages to now make his way up towards P5. But that was big, heavy contact, and that may be reviewed by the stewards very, very intensely, I am sure. Granted Correca's now trying to apply some pressure to the fellow Porsche in front. So he is very much wary of that Unicorns of Love Mercedes behind him. Bischoff has managed to get going again, but I think there's going to be quite extensive damage on the front end of that Porsche. Correcas absolutely has his mirrors full of that Mercedes, and he's bringing along the Porsche of Inestrosa and the Ferrari of Makowski as well for good measure. See how they all fare up the hill. Sam has been able to get a bit of a nice margin over the Porsche behind, and I think Correcas could be seriously under some pressure now from that Mercedes of Nicholas Huben, who is going to be gaining in the slipstream. We're on board the front splitter of this Unicorns of Love car. I'll tell you what, it's actually very close between all of them up the hill. None of them, I think, are able to make a move. Inestrosa trying to sneak one up the inside. Out of bus stop chicane, manages to force that Mercedes offline for a brief moment, but not enough to be able to actually get anything done. A bit of a scrap taking place with Komzayuk, Vassner, and Manuel Fuchs as well, but they're not able to do anything there. Whereabouts is Bischoff? Limping is that number 2 car, and yeah, heavy damage on the front end there. What a shame that is, and I'll be keeping an eye on these stewards' inquiries to see how they end up interpreting that incident. Also, just a bit of a report. We've got for the number 24 car, a 10-second stop and go penalty. So who is that? That belongs to, that is Darren King. So Darren King, another one of the Lamborghinis. I wonder if he was then the catalyst that ended up seeing Karppinen go around. Meanwhile, Komisayuk blasting his way past Sasha Vassner. Aston Martin, straight line speed, still very much strong here at Spa Frachorchamps. Although he's got deep, but over the AstroTurf he goes. May just about manage to hold on to the position. Could argue that he had the move done before the braking zone, so he should be able to keep hold of that one. But a bit of a scary moment for the number 8 car. Is up to P19 now, gaining 6 positions on the opening couple of laps of this race. We're only 10 minutes in, and it's been absolute chaos start to finish. Gaps opening up a little bit between some of these other cars, but one that has stayed very much nose to tail is Grantis Korekis versus Nicholas Huben. No other penalties to dish out at the moment, but right now Huben, who has his eyes firmly planted on trying to make an overtake over his championship rival on board the number 6 Unicorns of Love Mercedes, then what's the straight line speed difference as they head up the hill? Granted, Korekis, he's 7 tenths back though from Noah Reader, so he won't be getting the same sort of tow that he was before. But look, it's decent speed from the Porsche. So, you know, it may not be the fastest in a straight line. It's definitely, you know, over the Ferrari. That seems to be the absolute rocket ship at the moment, but it does look like you can get some healthy speed out of this Porsche. I'll tell you what, though, something that's heating up. Trevor Wenham losing pace on the last lap, 2 to 3 tenths slower than both Merles and Alexander. Very close in terms of their fastest laps, but I tell you what, even though this group of 3 may have run away at the front of the field, they are very much looking like they're going to be heating up for a battle in just a moment. Swapping the positions further down the order as well, but I need to keep an eye on this. How is it going to fare for the likes of Trevor? I haven't got quite the suite of cameras that I would usually like to use on some of these cars, but thankfully we can see on board the rear wing as Huben, I think, trying to make the move now. The torque in the Mercedes engine, but the Porsche fighting back on the back straights up towards Lake Como around the outside. Huben tries to go, be amazing if he can make that one stick, and can he get the nose cut across off for the Porsche? And he can! Incredible stuff from the German driver. Stroh's is getting involved now, and it's a big run out of turn 9 there, down the inside of Bruxelles. Grantis Korekis trying to defend as many positions as he can, and he's been forced out there, and now it's Makowski that's getting involved as well, trying to go around the outside of No Name. Surely that's a step too far, but the Lithuanian finds himself now down into P9, only 1 position ahead of where he started, and that Ferrari is going to be quick up the hill, and he may well have some distinct company from the Italian car in just a moment. Schneckenberger's made his way past the Mercedes of Sasha Vassner, the 2 Mercedes, and that is the number 2 car. Bischoff, I think, has just retired to the pit lane, so no further racing from the 2-time champion today, who was showing some great pace in the Porsche, but that incident between himself and Walsingham that I'm sure will be investigated very, very shortly, and eagerly await the outcome of that inquiry. Unfortunately, saw him go into the wall. Hugo Merles, though, looking very, very quick at the moment in the number 17 car, putting Trevor Wenham under all sorts of pressure. I did say that he got away quickly at the start and maybe generating a bit too much tyre temperature in his number 4 Ferrari, and now could already be feeling a little bit of the repercussions of that. We'll have to see how that fares, as that is Darren King going in for his stop-and-go penalty. And a difficult day in the office for the Jean Alesi esports driver. Meanwhile, Korekis is going to have some company on his hands. Trevor Wenham got a good exit out of the source first time around, so he won't be challenged towards Lake Como this time. But what about Korekis? Makowski involved in this one as well, just a few tenths back. The Porsches we've seen, just need to check on Jack. Alexander doing his best to stay very much in touch with the Frenchman, and looking very fired up. So these 3 really pushing each other along at the moment. Korekis versus Inestrosa versus Makowski, but none of them able to change positions at the moment. I tell you what, closest gap on track right now is Alexander versus Merles in the battle for P2. It's allowing Trevor Wenham to just escape a little bit, and he needs to at the moment. He needs these two to scrap, because I'm not sure that with the setup he's got on board the car, if he quite has the level of longevity in those tyres that he may preferably want. 15 minutes into this race, 45 minutes left to go. Pit window will open in 10 minutes time, but if you go early in the stop, of course, you're going to have to carry the downside of that on the second half of the race. I know the undercut is extremely powerful in 1.9 with this sort of level of degradation that we are seeing happening with the tyres. The undercut is certainly something that cannot be ignored, but whether or not it is worth to carry that extra wear in the latter stages of the race, that's the judgment call that these drivers have to make. But it is the Pro Series drivers, they know what they're doing, and they, I'm sure, will be contemplating that very deeply. So we'll go on board the rear wing of Trevor Wenham. I think Merles may be running less downforce than the British driver that leads this race, because he consistently gains up the hill, but then Trevor's able to extend his advantage elsewhere. Someone that can't extend any advantage anywhere as it's almost 3 wide down towards the bus stop. McCoskey trying to go around the outside of Korekis. We saw, I think it was Sammy pull off a similar move earlier on, side by side on the exit. And Stroh's has been able to run away in all of this. We'll go on board with Robbie Stapleford, who's got a beautiful view of the two drivers up ahead of him, scrapping down towards La Source they go. Korekis will cover off the position as they get towards the apex of the corner. I need to check up at the front of the field, though, as well, because it's all kicking off, because now Trevor Wenham has definitely got some company. Alexander's dropped back a little bit, but maybe he'll just want to watch from a distance, because Hugo Merles, the Frenchman, trying to reel in Trevor Wenham, gaining in the slipstream, but I don't think he's quite got enough, and the British driver is able to hold on for the time being, but it really does look like the momentum is shifting the way of the Ferraris behind, and much the case for McCoskey versus Korekis, so the Porsche having a pretty good job in a straight line to keep that Ferrari behind him in P10, but it's allowed Robbie Stapleford to absolutely get involved in the action now as Hutchinson, that's Neuwirth. Oh dear. I do believe that Neuwirth has disappeared into the Shadow Realm there, which is rather unfortunate. And we'll take this opportunity to see if we can head for a replay. Well, that worked fantastically. There's the animation, everybody, but unfortunately we caught it a little bit too late. So we'll try to make use of that wonderful graphic a little bit better later on, but unfortunate stuff for Voltek Neuwirth, who seems to have disconnected from the server. Disappointments for him. Meanwhile, Wenham versus Merles versus Alexander, the top three, absolutely nose to tail. McCoskey again, almost pushing along Korekis, who manages to close back in on Inostroza, but he's constantly able to just run away just that little bit. And so it's these groups here that you want to keep an eye on when it comes to the strategy. It gets to that pit stop phase of the race, because these are the ones that are very likely to go for that slight kind of undercut, try to get that advantage over those around. And McCoskey got a great exit out of that corner, as did Merles, though, and he was looking... Oh, and that's Alexander down the inside! Deep on the brakes there from the Frenchman. Alexander didn't waste any time thinking about it. Trevor Wenham says, thanks, guys. You two have a scrap back there, and I'll try to run away. Someone that can't, though, is McCoskey, trying to apply the pressure on Inostroza and Korekis. Around the outside he goes, and Korekis is boxed in on the exit of the bus stop chicane there. He will have the acceleration, but he gets over the curb, and he's going to lose the momentum, surely, as they head down towards that Source, trying to keep a nose on the inside as they get down towards turn one there. Robbie Stapleford's dropped back a little bit. Korekis fighting for everything he can right now in that number one car, as Nicholas Huben applying the pressure now to Noah Reid a little bit further up the field. Gap at the front, suddenly 1.5 seconds between Wenham and Jack Alexander, and we're going to have a look at all of these systematically. So Alexander versus Merles right now in the fight for P2. Frenchman feels the pressure, defends the inside line, and Alexander won't try to go up the inside. What about Huben trying to make a move on Noah Reid, his fellow German? The Porsche versus Mercedes pretty even in a straight line, but I think the Unicorns of Love car is going to get the job done, and he does. And now it's all kicking off almost three abreast as they head in towards Lake On for McCoskey, Stapleford and Korekis. Inostroza's managed to escape a little bit up the road in all of this, and Hutchinson's now getting involved. He's got around the outside of Stapleford, incredible move, and now he's trying to put a move on McCoskey, who covers the inside line. The Lamborghini driver, the Canadian, and so often we've praised his racecraft capability, doesn't have the fastest car today, but right now is the number one Lamborghini on circuit, with his teammates having that stop and go. Karppinen having that being, unfortunately, the catalyst, well, after something we believe with Darren King. promoting that big crash at the beginning, but again, Hutchinson, he just keeps himself out of trouble, and now it might not be the best position that he would have wanted from today's race, but he is very much in that battle and has an absolute wealth of talent to really use behind the wheel of that Lamborghini to try and see if he can do something about it. Another scrap is kicking off further down the order is Tobias Nur in this number 33 Porsche. Gained 9 positions since the start. Now applying the pressure to Michael Frank. A bit too much pressure at that as the pit window opens and the pair of them come to a halt on the exit there of turn 13. Gerardis is about to come across these two, but a bit of contact there, and let's see if we can maybe make slightly better use of the replay graphic this time around. And there we go. So let's go on board with Tobias Nur. This is the number 33 car. They get down towards turn 13 then. Oh, just very, very late on the brakes. Massively miscalculated there. And unfortunately for the pair of them coming to a halt, the 32 and the 33 respectively. But able to get underway again eventually. But obviously losing themselves quite a chunk of time. Gaps established at the front end of the field now. A couple of drivers have come into the pit, so Sasha Vassner is one of them, as is Manos Gerardis, so he hasn't wasted any time. I think he was carrying some damage on the Lamborghini. Fights inside the top 10, though, like I say, they have settled, but one that may be about to kick off is Samuel Ratz versus Jan Drexler and Maxim Komazayuk. Only a few tenths separating these drivers. The Ferrari, the BMW, the Aston Martin. Manuel Fuchs also getting involved in the 992 Porsche just behind as well. And down the inside, does he? Komazayuk looking for it, but he can't quite make anything happen. Although it's a slide, that's a mistake from the BMW driver, number 25 car, just up ahead. Komazayuk has gained 8 positions already. I said this was a man I expected to be a bit further up the field. He certainly benefited, of course, from some of those other incidents. It's getting very close as well between Samuel Ratz and Nico Peninen just up ahead. So it's 2 BMWs right now that are under pressure. And also further up the order, Korekis coming under pressure from the Ferrari of Mikoski once again. So I have to keep an eye on those gaps as well. As Komazayuk gets good drive out of pool and trying to explore any potential opening. He's got very good run towards this corner. We saw it come to blows between Frey and Nur not too long ago into 13. But these two, they stay out of each other's doors this time around, although they're bringing along Manuel Fuchs for company as well. The Porsche obviously is going to be very handy in this sector. But for the time being, nothing to be done between these positions just yet. Let's see, Mikoski gaining once again over the Porsche of Grantis Korekis as Walsingham has come into the pit. So there's the first of your top 10 that have come in for a pit stop. No more takers there. Samuel Ratz almost pushing along the BMW of Pennon towards the bus stop chicane there. Around the outside he goes. He's gained 12 positions in this race. And Komazayuk sends one up the inside, and he's made it stick over Drexler, who's immediately under pressure from Manuel Fuchs, who gets good traction on the exit in the Porsche, as you'd expect. And Drexler, in the space of just a couple of corners, loses just as many positions. Samuel Ratzo immediately trying to look at the outside now of Nico Pennon. Let's see, long pit lane for those guys on that inside loop. I think the longest pit lane on the calendar. Oh, that's Mikoski. Mikoski's gone off there. So what has happened to Krzysztof Mikoski through a ruse? He's going to be able to rejoin okay there, but let's have a look at a replay. He was applying the pressure to Grantis Korekis and was really looking like he was going to be able to surmount a challenge to make his way up into P9. As a result, he's dropped right into the middle of that battle with Ratz, Komazayuk and the rest. And just the back of the car just lets go mid-corner. Manages to keep it. Oh, no, not quite. I thought he was going to be able to keep it out of the wall there. But unfortunately, just a little bit too deep into that part of Radion. And that has cost him a great deal of time and also a bit of damage as well. Walsingham comes out clean in clean air as the first one of those drivers to make a stop. And be interesting to see how he gets on with that undercut strategy. How powerful is it going to be? Korekis, immediately after no longer quite having the same amount of pressure from the drivers behind have started to reel in again in a Strozer as Komazayuk versus Krzysztof Makowski, who is continuing to lose positions as Samuel Ratz looking around the outside of Pendleton doing an amazing job of trying to hold on to this position right now. It's getting very close. It's also very close between our leaders again. Jack Alexander hasn't quite been able to stick with the pace of his two Friars and Merles. He's gone for it. He's gone for the undercut. Oh, I thought that was going to be a bit of a clash with the concrete there. Don't want to be doing that one. As a Schneckenberger trying to go now around the outside of Jan Drexler. He looked to carry the momentum, but has got it all crossed up on the exit there up the hill. That won't happen. But what about Samuel Ratz as we go on board the rear diffuser? There's contact in the Blanchemont and Pendant. Oh, how has he managed to keep that in the remotest form together? And the flashing of the lights there. And we'll have to look on the replay for that one. This has turned into an extremely busy group of cars. That's Makowski and Drexler heading into the pits as well. And that was a big moment for those two as they went into Blanchemont. We just hopped on board the rear diffuser. And let's see if we can catch it. That was just... I know exactly, the argument's going to be that the gap should have been left there, and Pendon's going to say that it shouldn't have been sent, and the stewards, I'm sure, will have something to say about that. But the consequences were the pair of them ended up losing a chunk of time and some positions at that as well. Neither one was going to be happy. I'm surprised Pendon managed to even remotely. I know he was rather assisted by the wall in terms of which direction he ended up pointing in at the end of that, but... the fact that he was remotely looking in the right direction by the time he finished, trying to send one up the inside now of Schneckenberger. It's not quite going to work there, but fighting spirit still very much inside the cockpit of that number 30 BMW. And this feels like a rather convenient point to look at the penalty situation. So, 10-second penalty for the number 8 car. That is Komazayuk as Walsingham's come in for another stop. So I can only imagine that that's a drive-through penalty, and it's about the worst circuit on the calendar that you can go to get one of those penalties. So that is big disappointment for the Visceral Esports driver who was going for that undercut strategy. Merles just coming out of the pits right now, and he hasn't got the ideal clean air that he might have wanted. It's both Korekis and Samuel Ratz are applying the pressure to the drivers in front of him. 10-second time penalty as both Trevor Wenham and Jack Alexander come into the pits now as well. So it's all kicking off at this stage of the race. Couple of drag races up the hill to keep an eye on. Korekis not able to do anything about Inestroza this time around. Inestroza actually goes into the pits, and Samuel Ratz is going to get a run on Manuel Fuchs. I think the Ferrari straight line speed after they came together, or they came together with the Beamer not too long ago, that very exact same corner. Thankfully managed to get through there cleanly this time around. Defends the inside line at the chicane. And neither one of them will look towards the pit lane. Let's see, though. We'll have a look at Hugo Merles. As actual fact, Manuel Fuchs still applying the pressure to Samuel Ratz. We'll keep an eye on him just a moment. I want to see, of course, where our leaders emerge in all this, and whether or not the undercut strategy for Merles has worked for him. Good run out of La Source for the number 31 car that hasn't quite given up on this position just yet. And Samuel Ratz will have a bit of damage, not as much as Pendon, but a bit of damage on board the Ferrari. Whether or not he comes under pressure by the time they get to Les Combes, as do just want to see. So both drivers have now come to a stop inside the pit lane, so still a while for them before they end up getting going again. But Manuel Fuchs unable to do anything about the Ferrari in front of Samuel Ratz. But let's have a bit of a look as Robin Schaefer comes into the pits. So there's Hugo Merles. So now it begs the big question, whereabouts is the likes? So Jack Alexander, so he's right at the end of the pit lane. He is right next to Eau Rouge there. Trevor Wenham, he has got underway, so Trevor Wenham still has a position over Jack Alexander, but the crucial question is, if we go on board the Ferrari of Merles, has the undercut strategy works for the Frenchman? He'll come over the crest now of Radion, and you see there's a Lamborghini up ahead. Can't quite see from the onboard. That is Darren King. There's Wenham just behind. And there's Hugo Merles, who's coming at him like an absolute freight train with the extra momentum. But I don't think he's going to be able to do anything. But his tyres, they will be warm. And that's a bit of curb and a half to be taking there. Jack Alexander's maybe lost a little bit of time in the pits there. 2.5 seconds back. But Hugo Merles, if he wants to make a move, he really has to make it now. But it did seem like in the early stages of the race, Wenham was able to get temperature in his tyres faster than the other Ferraris around him, and that may be crucial to him being able to defend this position. Closest fight on circuit is what we are looking at right now, and the battle for the effective race lead. Also, drive-through penalty for the number 13 car, just to see who that is. And that is Walsingham. And that was for causing a collision. And of course, so that wasn't for track limits. That was for the incident with Marco Bischoff. And another heavy penalty of that, especially around the Spa Frachorchamps circuit. So, difficult day for the Visceral Esports driver after what was looking like a very promising start. 5-second penalty for the number 33 car as well. As Walsingham versus Gerardis down in towards Laycom. Walsingham obviously trying to recover as many positions as he can now. 18 down. Gerardis not making his life easy in the bright pick Lamborghini. But he does eventually end up conceding the position there. So number 33 car, who does that belong to? And that is Tobias Nur. So that 5-second, that is with the clash with Michael Frey, I can only presume. And then a 10-second time penalty for the number 30 car. And that is Nico Pennon. So the stewards have deemed then that Nico should have left space on the inside of Blanchimont. I said it would go either way. And of course, stewards have much better views of the instance. They can go back and have a good look a few times over. And they've determined that the Finnish driver should have left a gap there for the Ferrari. I think it was Samuel Ratz. And he didn't, and as a result, they came together in all of that. Meanwhile, Hugo Merles very much locked into the slipstream of Trevor Wenham, but he is not gaining down this back straight. And you know, it would look suggest. Well, I tell you what, the down shifts on the Ferrari 296 sound pretty handy, don't they? That Trevor Wenham he's not running much less downforce than or much more downforce than some of those other guys. So maybe they are running pretty even levels of aero, but just different approaches perhaps in terms of the suspension aspects of the car, because Trevor very much able to keep that other Ferrari at bay. Meanwhile, Schneckenberger, that's not a camera I wanted. Schneckenberger in the number 28 Mercedes was trying to bear down on Drexler, and it's Drexler now that's trying to make a move on Manuel Fuchs, the BMW. Good straight line speed and goes all the way around the outside of the Porsche before they even get to the braking zone. Finds himself in P14. That will be, I think, maybe P13, as Comstock is the last driver to serve their pit stop. And he's coming under a little bit of pressure from Schneckenberger as well. I'm having to keep one eye on this battle and also one eye on the gaps between our top two drivers. Be interested to see whether or not Alexander can reel in those two, because he's lost a bit of time. But if those two do start to scrap, then very much could look to have a battle on our hands. Vassner, I think, just managed to get past Ramone at a rather unusual part of the circuit. And unfortunately, haven't quite caught it on the replay, so apologies, everybody there. But one way or another, has managed to make his way up into P18. Meanwhile, Hugo Merles, again, close to the back of Trevor Wenham. Very even between the pair of them. Only half a tenth in favour of the Frenchman last time round. Alexander matching them both pretty much square on the time as well. Good exit, though, from Wenham. And if he has the same sort of straight line speed, which one would have to assume, but he will, that he may well be okay to defend this one more time. Manuel Fuchs and Schneckenberger closing up to the back of Jan Drexler, but unable to do anything there. A bit of a wide moment for the BMW ahead, and that may put some pressure. We'll go on board the rear diffuser of the BMW, the number 25 car of Drexler, as he made this move not too long ago, but the Porsche is mighty in the corners. It isn't so much of a slouch down the straights either anymore. And Schneckenberger absolutely firmly locked into the mix of all of this as well. In towards Eau Rouge and Radion they go. Bit of a skip over that apex. Got to be careful on the track limits. Could very much be a factor later on in this race. Also, just from what I gather in the chat, confirming then that not only did Boothby's broken finger take place in the outlap of qualifying for this event, but unfortunately it seemed to get delivered to him from his teammates, Grantis Korekis, which I imagine there's probably going to be some level of discussion after the race about that, but as mentioned before, obviously wishing George a speedy recovery with that, and hopefully not too much of a severe break either. But yeah, direct drive wheels can be seriously dangerous. Obviously, sim racing, generally for the most part, a much safer pastime than real life motorsport, but those very high torque wheelbases can seriously do some damage if your fingers are caught in them. So hopefully not too much in the way of injury for George, and he'll be back up and running with us sooner rather than later. Fingers crossed. This battle still kicking off for P13 between Drexler, Fuchs and Schneckenberger. Hugo Merlet's dropped back to about 7/10 of a second away from Wenham. Now, in actual fact, Alexander was able to reel in these two again. Fastest lap for Alexander in the second stint again. So we've got good pace in the early phase of the race, but just seemed to drop away a little bit last time around in the early stages, and that looked like a wiggle from Manuel Fuchs over Blanchimont. Don't be getting too close to that curve at such high speed. I'll tell you what, if that was 1.8 as well, then I could imagine that car being absolutely sent into the barrier. But thankfully, managing to keep it fairly neat and tidy. And yes, to Mini Simeon. Yes, I can imagine that the discussions may be a bit on the emotional level, shall we say, for such a thing. Obviously, quite a rare occurrence in sim racing to end up suffering an injury, and an even rarer one for it to sort of unfortunately be rather at the hand of your teammate, by the sound of it. Yeah, so I mean, we saw in actual fact the Yas Heat. I think some of the Yas Heat Veloce cars had a bit of a coming together at Laguna Seca last time as well. We had run-ins between, I think, a couple of them. I know Boothby and Jardier, they had a couple of small touches, but nothing all too significant. But then I think there's a sort of decent group of friends amongst all of those, and I think unfortunately there was a bit of punting that's resulted in some rather more severe consequences in those races. So maybe not the happiest in the Veloce and Yas Heat camp at the moment, but hopefully when we head over to Bathurst, which will be the next round on the calendar, that all things will be sorted in all of that. What a race that is going to be, in legendary circuit, just like Spa Frachorchamps, that has absolutely shown all of the action that I would have possibly expected from this 20-turn masterpiece. Hugo Merles continuing to sustain the pressure. I'll tell you what though, interestingly, 2:16.1 from Merles last time round. Now that is a blisteringly quick lap, but crucially, despite it being a quarter of a second faster than Alexander's, it was not counted as the fastest lap, so he must have extended somewhere on the lap, and he needs to be careful. Same goes for Trevor Wenham actually, 2:16.2 on the last lap, both of which would have taken that fastest lap, but did not end up counting and getting the graphic to move over that little purple timer. So they do need to be careful not to push the limits around this circuit all too much. Drexler, Fuchs, Schneckenberger still scrapping as bringing Samuel Ratz and Sasha Vassner into all of that as well. So we could have a five-way fight for P13 in just a moment. And Hugo Merles again, despite being absolutely locked into the slipstream of that number 4 Ferrari that he has been staring at the back of now since the very beginning of this race, just has not quite been able to find enough of an edge to sneak his way past. In actual fact, let's go on board with Hugo. Let's see, how is his car behaving at this point in the race? Of course, he was the first out of the top 3 to get on those tyres, only by a lap, but depending on your setup, depending on whether or not you have any slides, that can make all the difference. See, not quite the same level of kind of stabbiness in the steering, a fantastically technical term, I know, to describe the entry. But we saw in the Porsche when we were on board with, I think it could have been Bischoff earlier on, and making his way in towards that right-hander of turn 13. He was very much letting the car just kind of drift its way through. Whereas you can see, although it wasn't a great deal of steering input from the Frenchmen that we're on board with, it was, you know, there was very much that gradual encouragement. It's very smooth through there. And I think the Ferrari as a platform, but in terms of its downforce and the balance of the car and everything, really does encourage that and very much allows for it. And of course it requires very careful and precise execution as well from the drivers in order to make it work. But Hugo Merles again taking a 10th out of Trevor Wenham, although last time round a fastest lap again from Alexander. So in the early stage of this race, although based on the gap you wouldn't think it would buy a great deal, but yeah, Jack very much on pace with those top two. And if those two do start to have some side-by-side action, very much that three-way fight could be on once more. Manuel Fuchs looking for a move on the BMW of Drexler again. He's got a nose down the inside this time into the bus stop chicane, and I think he's going to get it done on the brakes. Drexler's got to be a little bit careful of the Mercedes and the Ferrari. It's almost three wide as they come out of the exit of the bus stop chicane there. Schneckenberger on the outside line there, trying to make it stick towards turn one. Samuel Ratz will go on board with him as he looks at these two into that first turn, and the BMW being sent towards the outside line. Schneckenberger says thank you very much. Now it's BMW versus Ferrari on the exit. The BMW looks to actually have the extra grunt. That's an interesting thing to note about the performance differences of these cars. May have had a slightly better exit understeer for Samuel Ratz, but keeps it all together through that part circuit. White flag out for Robbie Stapleford, but doesn't look like any major harm done. Now as we see them go up to the top of the hill, Samuel Ratz looking for a move down the inside, and he is going to get it done, and very confidently sends out the inside of Jan Drexler, who after taking a position away from Manuel Fuchs has found himself under pressure these last few laps and ends up having to hand over a couple, and maybe will be under pressure from Vassner very shortly as well. I'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But Ratz then getting up into P15, and yet Sasha Vassner very much already on the case of the BMW ahead of him. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, gap has extended just a smidge between Wenham and Merles. 7/10 of a second between them. Doesn't sound like much, but based on the gaps we've had in this race so far today, that is one of the larger gaps we've seen in a while, with Alexander still just a couple of seconds behind with just under 18 minutes left on the clock. Have to see whether or not Vasta in the Mercedes. It looks like the BMW has got pretty good grunt around here, but just doesn't quite seem to have it, almost being pushed along by the Mercedes there on the exit of Stavelot. And now up the hill they climb. And yet the BMW, it's certainly got the legs. Mercedes unable to do anything about that car in front. Meanwhile, what about Samuel Ratz? He's looking to make a move pretty soon. Someone that has managed to, though, is Walsingham further down. I think that was actually a wide moment for Drexler. It was. He went very deep out of the chicane there. Couldn't get the car stopped. And Hugo Merles absolutely bumper nose to tail with the Trevor Wenham at the front of the pack. Again, unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to skip looking at a replay of Walsingham's overtake, because we've got a few things kicking off right now. And the first one on the agenda is Sasha Vasta versus Drexler, who I think has gone wide at turn one again. And Vasta has made his way through, but the BMW may very well have an opportunity of coming back. He's gone very wide. Oh, the exit of Radion again. And I think that's actually been accompanied with a bit of a lift to make sure he doesn't get a penalty. Someone that won't be lifting anytime soon, though, is Samuel Ratz trying to go down the inside in the 296 and make it 13 positions gained up to P14. The Ferrari goes, and Steckenberger unable to do anything against the German driver in the number 29 car. So those two battles maybe settle for the time being, but Hugo Merles still applying the pressure as we go on board the rear wing of Trevor Wenham, your race leader since the very beginning. He got away fantastically, and with the sort of even pace that these drivers have had after 45 minutes of racing, it's just those few thousandths that you gain at the start of the race. It's getting yourself in a pole position that just allows you to just maybe have enough to hold back someone that at times has arguably looked to have been faster. But Trevor still continuing to do just enough to keep the Frenchman at bay. Very even lap times between your top three. Less than half a tenth between each of them. The fastest, though, again, was Jack Alexander, but he's just a bit too far back to really do much about these two. See, a bit more comfortable staying within the track limits there. Ferrari, downforce powerhouse. And absolutely able to stay within the bounds of what you can get away with through that part of the circuit. Again, Merles just gains nothing up the hill. I wonder if it's almost the other way around at this rate. Merles might actually have the downforce advantage. I'm seeing a white flag for Michael Frey. I'm not sure what happened to him. And the answer is absolutely nothing, as far as I can tell. So the overlay just getting a little bit on the enthusiastic and cautious. I know we have had quite the abundance of incidents so far today, but that was not one of them. Support for Samir in the chat, who's found himself in P4. In actual fact, let's have a bit of a look at the positions gained in this race for all of our drivers. Let's see if I can actually find how to do this. I promise I'm a professional, everybody. So let's have a bit of a look at that. 19 positions gained for Manuel Fuchs in P13 at the moment in that portion. I think that is going to be the largest margin up and down the field. That seems pretty difficult to beat, and yeah, by a decent margin as well. Steckenberger and Drexler also drawing even on 14 positions. Ramone has gained 12 from his rather disappointing qualifying. Up at the pointier end of the grid, Hutchinson again, though, impressive 8 positions gained, and very good stuff from the Canadian driver. Obviously benefiting a little bit from some of the chaos that took place in front of him, but it's results like that. You need to be, the days where you need to be strongest is often when your car is at its weakest, and that is what often makes a difference at the end of a championship. Because if you've got a car that's working well somewhere, chances are, if you're on pace, if you've dialed in with the setup, you're going to extract a good result. Where you really need to shine is when you haven't got that best package in the field, and you need to extract every single ounce that you can out of it. Someone that's trying to do exactly that, Hugo Merles, the closest he's been in a while. Little bit of a defensive move from Wenham. Not quite committed to a full defense, though, but it does really look like Merles might have the momentum in his favor. Subtle differences in time, again, between these drivers. An absolute hair's width between them at times this race. But the Frenchman right now just does seem to have a slight upper hand. Someone that's trying to make a move and reclaim some important positions as well is Grantas Correcas, trying to go down the inside of Robbie Stapleford, now in towards Lacombe. Aston Martin, though, fighting on the outside. Oh, and it almost resulted in a collision on the exit of the corner there. Snap oversteer for Correcas. Did hear Jardier complaining about the back of his Porsche at Watkins Glen letting go spontaneously. And it looks like Correcas ran into a very similar sort of incident there as well, but thankfully not resulting in any contact. I think there was also maybe a swapping of position between Nico Pendon and Tobias Nert. But this might be about to kick off again. I think also Tobias might actually be in the old school Porsche, if I'm not mistaken. I think that is the previous version rather than the 992. And there's barely a width there. Oh, it's going to get very crowded. spotted, and it's not the first time, and Pennon is not letting up on that inside line. Obviously, he's already had a penalty dished out to him for that insert with Samuel Ratz, and there was nothing being given there to Tobias, who I think very grateful for the 1.9 suspension update, as I think 1.8 would have sent him right up into the sky with how much he was bouncing around out there, barely keeping it on the black stuff and holding the position in the end, but that got very close between those two. Someone else who is applying the pressure is Komazayuk on to Axel Ramane for P18, battle of the Aston Martins. As Tobias Nur again trying to make a move stick, and it's Gerardis is getting involved in this one as well. And the Lamborghini, although he's gone out exploring on the exit of Pouon there, Lamborghini just losing a little bit of front end grip and trying to send one down the inside, didn't quite come off. And it does look like Pennon's really the cork in the bottle here. I do need to check elsewhere though. Koreka's still pushing Stapleford along, absolutely glued to the rear diffuser of the Aston Martin, and may well get a move done this time around, as Tobias Nur has just done exactly that. Pennon has lost the position when that straight line speed is able to fight back. We'll have to wait and see. I've got too many battles to have a look at. We've got Korekas versus Stapleford. Pennon trying to go back around the outside of Tobias Nur. This got scary last time, and he can't make it stick. A little bit of a hop over the apex from the Porsche. Lamborghini in hot pursuit so of Gerardis down towards the bus stop chicane, trying to go all the way around the outside, and he might have made it stick just about. Oh, it's a bit scruffy, but the Greek driver does get it done, primarily as a result of the fact that I think Pennon May has got going again. I think did he hit the wrong button on the steering wheel to turn off his engine? I'm not sure. It wouldn't be the first time. There has been rather renowned incidents for people that I won't name, but I'm sure that anyone that follows all of the top level competitions on ACC would be familiar with a rather embarrassing incident at Bathurst. I shall say no more. And so even the highest level of competition drivers can really end up making, unfortunately, rather cataclysmic errors from button presses. I'll tell you what, though, Hugo Merles, this is definitely the greatest shot that he has had at going for glory so far, pushing on, but Trevor Wenham, he's still got the advantage. Merles, he is going to be sent towards the outside though. Wenham, he has to defend this time around. Alexander, he'll be wanting these two to scrap, and so it begins with 8.5 minutes left on the clock. This is a fight that potentially we have been waiting for this entire time, and it really does seem to maybe be starting to get underway now. Trevor Wenham surely will have the advantage again and able to hold off the Frenchman towards Lake On, but he's just getting ever closer bit by bit. Grantis Korekas very much trying to do the same against Robbie Stapleford on board the rear diffuser of the Aston Martin, but late braking from the British driver puts to an end any attack from the Porsche behind. Someone that can't quite stop the attack though is McCoskey, as Tempest look to the outside, switchback on the exit of the bus stop chicane, perhaps can't quite make it stick, and the Ferrari will have the advantage for the time being. Up at the front though, I saw the Delta go down to a 10th, and I'll tell you what, it's barely a smidge above that on the exit. Korekas has managed to get the move down in towards La Source. It's now side by side between Stapleford and Korekas as they head to Eau Rouge. That's going to be scary. They managed to get through, they're okay. Robbie Stapleford has to back out that one briefly. The Aston Martin straight line speed may be able to surpass the Porsche once more. Trevor Wenham has maintained the lead. Komazayuk has made a move over Axel Ramane. I can't look everywhere up and down the order, but it's Korekas now trying to defend this from Stapleford, who goes all the way around the outside, and I think he might have just about made it stick though. Korekas, he hits a loud pedal and he keeps it on the inside into turn 9, still on the inside now as they head towards Bruxelles. Number 1 car versus number 22, very close on the apex and a little bit of argy-bargy. The Porsche has the traction, it's got the acceleration on the exit. Stapleford trying to keep it down the inside in towards No Name, but he can't quite make it stick, and Korekas, after all that, does find himself back in towards P9, although Stapleford looking towards the inside line at Pouon can't make it happen. Whether or not he gets a run back up the hill again, we'll have to wait and see. It's all been kicking off between Komazayuk and Ramane as well, and it's Komazayuk has come out on top. But I then look on the replay because we've also got it still kicking off between your leaders. And is it going to come down to a last lap dive? 6.5 minutes left on the clock. There'll be 4 laps left to go when they next cross the line. No rain on the way, nothing else to worry about. It is just mono on mono between the two Ferraris at the front of the pack, although Alexander might be keen to join them in just a moment if he does manage to close that gap. Now it's down to 1.5 seconds. It was over 2, so that's just what those subtle little bits of scrapping has done between those two drivers. Stapleford to the outside at the bus stop chicane, and surely doesn't manage to keep that one. Stiggle, a little bit of contact, returning the favour from what he had of Bruxelles, and Correca sent towards the outside of the bus stop chicane again, side by side towards turn 1 they go. Gap between the leaders have opened up to 0.7 of a second. Correca, so inside line for the last source when he got the move done on the last lap. But now Stapleford back in the slipstream. He'll use the toe all the way up through Eau Rouge and Radion, and we'll try to surmount another overtake, but this one definitely not over and done with just yet. Oh, that's a big skip of the chicane there up the hill. I'm not sure if that's going to... Well, there may be something said about that if Stapleford does go for a move here and he pulls it off. I don't think he's going to be able to. Correcas is closing off the outside line, and Stapleford does stay behind. Drexler and Ramone now have been kicking off in the scraps as well. I think Drexler's coming under pressure from the Aston Martin. Komzai seems to have got past a pair of them, and Drexler will go on board the rear diffuser of the BMW. There's the Aston sitting just behind. I need to check on other scraps as well, because Samuel Ratz, Manuel Fuchs are kicking off as well. Samuel Ratz skips the lane com chicane. He's up into P13. Whether or not that sticks, we'll have to wait and see. Lord only knows what the stewards are up to in all of this. We'll have to check. Possibly at the end of the race. Ramone hasn't been able to make a move over Jan Drexler, who holds on to P18 for the time being. And for the first time in a long time, there's barely a red delta between the two cars. We'll just take a moment while we can breathe to see if there's anything penalties-wise. The answer is no. So no further action taken on any of the incidents taking place over the last few laps or so. Also, crucially, gap between the two at the front of the pack, 0.7 of a second now. Trevor Wenham, slight advantage over the two Ferraris behind. These three have been the absolute class of the field today, both in qualifying and in the race so far as well. 2 more laps left to go in this race, and Merles 0.8 back. He needs to be closer. He needs to sustain the pressure on Wenham. He's got too much experience inside the cockpit of that lead Ferrari to buckle under anything else, so you really need to be filling his mirrors. And right now the Frenchman not quite doing enough in the closing stage of this race. Jack Alexander getting a bit loose through that chicane as well. Ramone now trying to look for maybe a move down towards the inside bus stop chicane. He can't make it stick. What about Gerardis though? Further down the inside of Tobias. No, that's the run up to out of Stavolo. And Lamborghini versus the old Porsche. So the old Porsche maybe has some beneficial characteristics, but straight line speed is not one of them. And the Lamborghini, that is one of its strong suits. I think down the inside when they get to Blanchimont, I'm not sure there's anything that Tobias is going to be able to do. He's trying to keep his foot in it and keep as much of a challenge as he can, unless he sends one up the inside under brake. Under braking, he can't. And so I think Gerardis will have that one covered and go up into 22nd position. And the gaps between your race leaders still more or less about what they were a moment ago. Ramone versus Drexler in the battle for P18. Also Vassner versus Schneckenberger heating up for P15 as well. Ramone unable to do anything. Sasha Vassner looking at the Mercedes in front when you've got equal cars between one another. Obviously, we'll have slightly different setups, but unless you're really at polar opposite extremes, which at top-level competition you don't tend to see all too much. Everyone sort of converges on a similar sort of style of setup. Subtle differences. Oh, the battle for the race lead. That came down quick, down to just a couple of tenths. And this will be the final lap, actually. So it's come a little bit earlier than I was expecting. And Hugo Merles may have closed the gap when he needed to. It's kicking off further down the order as well. Darren King has just made his way past Nico Pennon for 24th position. But this is the fight that we need to keep an eye on at the moment. Hugo Merles, this will be the last fast slipstream that he gets all the way up to Eau Rouge, and it's a 0.4 of a second gap will go on board the rear wing of your race leader, Trevor Wenham, who has had pressure applied to him the entire time in this race from the Frenchman. Jack was in the midst of it all in the early stint of the race as well, but after the pit stops he's dropped back, and at the end of that run, will that be the last of the remaining opportunities? We'll have to keep an eye. Sasha Vassner versus Schneckenberger into the bus stop chicane as well, all the way around the outside. Vassner is trying to make it stick, a little bit of door-to-door banging, but he will go up the inside, our second part of the chicane, and he does it get through. Back to the... was that a mistake from Merles? The gap suddenly closed up, and it's opened up amongst that as well. Let's see if we can try to catch what happened there. It's all going to be a bit awkward. Sorry, it does look like, though, he just got a little bit hot into Bruxelles, and it's not helped him. 0.7 of a second between these two. It's been an absolutely titanic fight. Schneckenberger and Vassner still kicking off as well. I think Steinbrenner may have just got past Robin Schaefer. Does Robin Schaefer hand instant or run out of fuel? I'm not entirely sure, but he's running distinctly slowly. Schneckenberger is gaining on the run up the hill. But he can't do anything, I don't think, around the outside. He's trying it, but it's not going to happen by the time they get to the exit of that series of corners. I think Robin Schaefer has run out of fuel. He's come to a stop right ahead of this man who's got just one more corner. Huber all of a sudden is trying to apply pressure for P4 as well. But we're going to have to see how these two fare across the line. Just one more braking zone for Trevor Wenham. It's been an absolute masterclass in qualifying and in the race. He's been put to the test from Hugo Merles. But Trevor Wenham, the long-term #1 man on the LFM platform, has managed to take victory here at Spa after a tremendous drive. Merles and Jack Alexander ran out of the podium, but who's going to take P4? I think, although it's going to be close and Huben's been applying the pressure, it is going to go the way of Samuel Fock, and then Huben will follow up. Noah Reeder will be coming to the line in just a moment, and Schneckenberg is the last driver that may be likely to make a position change. Just checking, Schaefer has unfortunately retired to the pit, so I do believe that is what happened. Big unfortunate thing from there, miscalculation from the German driver, and I think he was already looking at the tail end of being a lap down as well, so just a little bit of a mass error unfortunately in all of that, but a costly one. I don't think Schneckenberger is going to be able to do anything about Vassner as they come into the last couple of corners. Vassner, I think, has done enough to hold on to that position, and he will end up taking P15 when they cross the line. And I think whilst we do have a little bit of flurrying of action between cars as they hit the finish line at the very end, with Walsingham recovering up to 21st position in the end in terms of all of those main battles. That will be it. Darren King, another difficult day, or another driver had a difficult day around here. Was deemed responsible for that incident on the lap 1 that saw a lot of drivers out of position and with heavy damage on the car. Has managed to recover up to 24th position and was gaining almost 3 seconds. Did gain 3 seconds actually over Tobias Nert at the very end there. And I think Nico Pendon, who has been limping over the latter stages of this race, he comes through in 25th. Steinbrenner is going to finish in 26th position. And with that said and done, that is round number 4, all said and done. Apologies, I've still got the results up from the championship standings. Do apologise. We'll go through the race results in just a moment when they come through, and see exactly where everyone finished at the end of that. Whether or not there was any other penalties that came into effect at the end, but my goodness, what a way for that race to finish there. Hugo Merles, he threw everything at Trevor Wenham. I told you, he needed to fill his mirrors a bit more than that. He got within a couple of tenths. He was within a tenth at one point in time. But in the end, the experience of Trevor Wenham prevailed. and he took what I believe is his first victory. We haven't seen him in the Pro Series, at least since I've been covering his last few seasons. I don't actually think he's competed in the Pro Series before, and what a way to make a statement. I knew he was going to be quick when he entered the server tonight, and he has done exactly that, and what a race he has put together today, and what a championship it will be if he decides to stick around for a bit more of the season. Absolutely loving the 296, clearly. And whilst it was the fastest car today, he was the one that managed to put it all together under immense amounts of pressure and take victory here at round number 4. Fantastic stuff as well from Hugo Merles and Jack Alexander. Those 3 drivers, your podium finishers, were absolutely the class of the field today, without a shadow of a doubt. 12 seconds ahead of Samer, who took a fantastic P4 and had to keep his wits about him in the closing stages. We will now have a look at the race results, with Nicholas Hooven applying the pressure at the end, who gets another consistent result and Korekis down in P9. So, after those top 5, Ida, Hutchinson, Inostroza, Korekis, Stapleford round out your top 10, with Makoski, Tempest, Rats, Fuchs and Vassner to the top 15. Schneckenberger, Komazayuk, Drexler, Ramone, Frey, Walsingham, Gerardis, Nur. King after that recovery from the difficult early starts. Hendon had a busy day. Steinbrenner, Schaefer, Nitter, Noldi and Neuwirth round out your top 30, although I think we've made our way into the DNS now. Marco Bischoff, Karpinen, Valentin Barrier and George Boothby amongst your other non-finishers from today, and big disappointment for some of those drivers, and a rather peculiar incident as well for George Boothby in that one. And again, wishing him a speedy recovery. And yes, whether or not there's a small amount of tension in the Veloce Heat camp this evening, well, I'm sure it'll all be sorted in time. Time is the greatest healer, of course. Hopefully, if we're lucky, we might get an interview. If we've got any drivers that are keen to join us, that would be wonderful. If they would speak to us, it's always fantastic, especially when you have such an intense race like that, to see exactly what it was like being in the cockpit of those cars. So if you are able to give a little bit of a nudge to any of the drivers and encourage them to join us for an interview, then do not hesitate. It'd be lovely to talk to them. So we'll hang around for just a few minutes before we finish off for tonight. But what an evening of racing. Spa, the Pro Series, it never disappoints. It was always destined to be a dramatic and action-packed race, and that's exactly what it was. All the way from the starts, or all the way from qualifying with fantastic times and cars, the drivers that were sort of out of position for where we might have expected them, and that just put together a great showing. Some fantastic performances there. Then it all kicked off on lap 1. Big crash with Darren King. Seemingly, we didn't quite catch it on camera, but seemingly based on the steward's review, causing Karpinen to spear off into the wall, and then found himself stranded amongst the track. And unfortunately, as is the nature of that part of the circuit, especially on the opening lap, it's almost unavoidable to have a big pile up there. And I think a lot of drivers actually did a tremendous job to come to such a stop, to try to keep the damage as minimal as possible. So good heads-up driving from a lot of those. We did see some rather interesting incidents at times, and some rather busy bits of racing. Emotions running high with such things and tension on the prizes, on the line in this championship as well. Of course, over 6,000 euros worth of prizes up for grabs. And of course, a bit of a new thing for this season as well is that the drivers that end up coming away with a victory during the season, they are, regardless of the rest of their campaign, that they will go away with a €100 voucher from either Glorious Gaming or Ducky Keyboards. And for this week, that will be for Glorious. So Trevor Wenham, even if this is a one-time showing from the British driver, he has certainly at least profited from his stellar drive. And Hugo Merles was absolutely pushing him all the way there, but unfortunately wasn't quite able to get the position over him in the end. It doesn't look like, unfortunately, that we are going to have any interviews, but nonetheless, we have exciting things to look forward to in the next week. So we'll be heading to Bathurst for round number 5, another tremendous circuit, which is guaranteed to put together some incredible action in exactly the same way that Spa Frachorchamps has. And also, round number 3 of the Virtual Endurance Masters will be taking place next Saturday for the 8 hours of Nürburgring, and qualifying will be taking place the Friday evening before. So do have a look at all of those. And if you do want to stay in tune with all the action that you have seen this evening on the Pro Series, then do consider subscribing to the channel. It's constantly growing. It still started back in August on this channel. It's been an amazing journey since then, and great to have each and every one of you supporting along the way. And if you fancy a bit of action yourself from what you've seen, and you want to see what this daily racing on the LFM is all about, then head over to lowfuelmotorsport.com. Get yourself signed up, get yourself a license, and you can start to work your way through the ranks and compete for some very exciting prizes, not just in the Pro Series, but amongst the plethora of championships that LFM hosts. And if ACC isn't quite your cup of tea, then do also have a look at R Factor 2, where there's everything from open wheelers to sports cars and even more. So there is something for everybody between those two simulators on the LFM platform. And if nothing else, if you just want to be a part of this constantly growing, incredible community, which is now up to a whopping 89,000 members, we are rapidly approaching the 90,000 mark. Then also, as well as signing up to the LFM platform, do also consider joining the Discord server, where you can stay in touch with such a community of passionate sim racing and real life racing enthusiasts. And what a great community it is. For tonight, though, it does look like that is going to be it. So thank you, everybody, so much for watching and all of your support on this evening's amazing action that's been put on by these guys in the Pro Series. Join us same time, same place next week for the Case King Pro Series, when we head to the mountain of Mount Panorama at Bathurst Race Circuit. Look forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. But for tonight, then, it's goodbye.